Most projects do not fail because of bad plans or poor tools. They fail because of leadership, decision-making, and people.
We still hang on to this idea that it's the leaders that are the prime determinant of success. It's the communities and the environments that leaders create, which is the prime determinant of success or failure.
We are joined by Dr Bradley Hasting, a leadership researcher and executive educator from Sydney University, John Grill Institute for Project Leadership. He is working with some of the world's most complex major projects. Brad began his career as an engineer until a 100 million mining project failed, not because the technology was wrong, but because no one listened, aligned, or led effectively. That moment shifted his entire career into understanding how leadership actually works inside real projects.
We'd spent $100 million on this new fancy equipment. We couldn't get it to work. It wasn't the technical stuff, it was the people.
In this conversation, we unpack why modern projects are becoming more complex, why technical competence is no longer enough, and why mindset now matters more than skill set. We explore why projects really fail, how to lead when you do not have authority, and what project leaders must do differently to succeed in uncertainty, and of course, how this all set to change with the rise of AI. If you manage projects, lead teams, or operate in complex stakeholder environments, this episode will change how you think about leadership. Let's go beyond the plan. Good morning, Dr. Bradley Hasting, and it's great really to have you here. We have got a great topic really to talk about here today, but before we dive into that, tell us a bit more about yourself. Who is Bradley Hasting and why people should listen to you?
Yeah, I'm an engineer, believe it or not. I was one of those kids who loved Lego, and my entire dream was to design and build new futures. I was going to build better buildings, better mines, better bridges, all that sort of stuff. And my dream came crashing down in my first summer job, where
what happened?
I was at a mine out west of Sydney near Lithgow, and we'd spent like $100 million on this new fancy equipment, and we couldn't get it to work. And what I noticed was that it wasn't the technical stuff. Like, this was amazing technology.
Yeah.
It was the people. The managers didn't listen to the operators. The operators had some pretty good ideas, but no one listened to them. The engineers, they didn't listen to anyone. And in fact, the engineers preferred to argue with each other rather than try and address the problem. And something shifted in my being at that particular point. And I realized that, if I wanted to build a better future for the world, that technology or new engineering wasn't necessarily going to get me there, because no matter how good the technology was or the engineering was, it was going to be run by humans. And that shift to moving from, I guess, the technical system to the social system is really what sort of grounded my career since. So I've never worked as an engineer. Instead, I went out and I worked as a management consultant. I went to help organizations transform the way they work. I worked with multinationals around the world, helping them radically reorganize to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. And this idea of working with people to help them make better decisions is really what's kind of gained a bit of traction throughout my career from different lenses. I worked, I guess it was about 15 years as a management consultant. I then worked in government transformations, in transforming government services in the UK and making some pretty radical adjustments which improved outcomes for the public and taxpayers, of course. And then from a research lens, I went and researched, how people come together in order to affect outcomes and affect change. And now, from an executive education lens, although I must say executive education has kind of been the common thread through that, I was always someone who preferred to get my clients in a room and teach them a method and help them apply it to their businesses rather than go in and give them a report on what they should do. So that thread of helping people understand their operations better, their leadership better, has been something that's kind of like been percolating through my career, and that's where I am now, which is bringing all of that knowledge from those different lenses together, plus a whole bunch of knowledge from giants in terms of researchers that have dived into these kind of topics, bringing that together into executive education that works.
Amazing. That's what we have in common. I'm coming from civil engineering background as well, but I haven't really that much done civil engineering to be honest. So, but you're right. The human element is really important, and such a key thing that it doesn't matter. We're doing operation, we're running projects, we're leading people, whatever we do. That human element, in particular, now in the world of AI that we're living in, and it's the beginning of the journey. The whole AI thing is just 3 years old, and everybody thinking that AI will take over, but the reality is that human element, what basically is going to be the focus of our attention today. It's something that you cannot simply ignore that and walk away and say, look, the technology or the operation or procedures, they will just do the job perfectly possible. No, that's not.
It doesn't work like that,
no,
unfortunately. And even AI, I don't think works like that. We need to learn how to work with AI. Absolutely. And that's something I want to pick up on a bit later today.
Awesome. Great. So I'm really fascinated by your subject today, and in particular leadership, because there is a lots of talk about leadership and management and what's the difference between leadership and management. And we have got a guy who is like leading people, or the other one who is managing people, and all the rest of it and everything in between. Who is doing a better job? Who is doing a worse job? What's the outcome for the team? We're going to unpack all of those today, hopefully. So the topic that you have chosen for today is that the mind of a modern project leader, why mindset matters more than ever. Why did you choose this one?
I think it's it just shows the shift that the research and the data is telling us in terms of leadership. So, and we have, and I'll talk about this idea of zombie leaderships a bit later, but these ideas and conceptualizations that we have about leadership, which are quite frankly outdated and quite frankly unfit for the complexities and the uncertainties and the challenges of modern day projects. And so what we're learning is that it's much less about skill sets and much more about mindset. And it's that kind of tension that I really want to unpack today, because so much of what we do when we talk about leadership is about the skills and the competencies of leaders. And we don't talk very much about how leaders think. What's their wisdom? What's their judgment? What's their character like? And when we look at it through research lenses, it's actually those later things, the mindset, the wisdom, the character, which is actually correlated with success.
Amazing. And I understand you're going to talk about the John Grinnell Institute from Sydney University as well, which I've got a great course, leadership course, in fact, that's really designed to teach people all this stuff. It's not just that we say, look, yes, some people are born leaders. It is something that everybody can learn. We will unpack that later today, I understand.
It's not true that people are born leaders. So there's a famous study called the twin study,
right,
where they looked at identical twins. And so you would assume that if we were born, then the DNA would be the same for both twins and they'd both be the same kind of leader. Leaders. Actually, I think DNA accounts for something like 30% of the variation between leaders. So it is a bit, but the majority, the 70%, is actually lived experience. So the idea that you're born a leader is defunct.
outdated.
Yeah, I have to draw a line under that one, and it's about developing leaders. Yeah.
So I understand people are signing up with Sydney University, the John Grill Institute, and they are already like on top of their game. They come from Asia, they come from United States, Europe, everywhere to basically learn some more stuff about this. But they're not like recent graduates. They're people who are already on top of the game. They're already project directors, project managers, project leaders, corporate leaders, and they come and sign up for this course to basically learn it methodically, not just by the trade or like 20 years previous experience that they have got, but learn it basically very systematically based on the proven research that shows, how to become a better leader, and they become a better version of themselves when they go back after 11 months, isn't it? That's a long
11
time,
months.
isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So that's what we...
Our mission, as you say, is to improve project leadership. And I have to take my hat off to John Grill here for his generous foundation. Have to take my hat off for John Grill here for his generous donation, which founded our institute, but also his insight, because what John noticed was that when we do large things, we in Australia tended to look overseas for project directors and people to do those projects. And even that overseas talent wasn't really hitting the button in terms of getting these mega projects to succeed. And the gap here is really at that sort of senior end of leadership. And it correlates with, the participants that I talk to. When I talk to them, the common thread with them is they go, I've done all the project leadership stuff. I read all the books, but there's still something missing in my understanding of how to do these large, complex mega projects. And that's where we focus. That's where we focus with our executive education. We call it executive leadership in major projects because it is that top echelon. And it is those people who are kind of like, this is a bit different. It's a bit more complex. And I want to learn not only the science, but I also want to learn with people from around the world. So as you say, we have people coming in from Americas, from Africa, from Asia, who are leading massive projects, $10, $20 billion projects in some cases.
Great. So that's a promise that we're going to give to our audience today, that if they stick around, they learn a lot about what's going on here. We're not promising that at the end of this podcast, they're going to be, presented with the, 11-month graduation of that course. No, that's not what we promised. But what we're going to promise them is that they're going to get a good gist and good understanding about, and very, very short course, 1 hour, I should say,
Yes.
of what's going on here. Okay, great. Let's dive into the subtopics that we have got here. Why projects fail?
Great question. This has been studied. We're beneficial because some greats in our field have really dived into this topic. Bent Flyberg from Oxford, I'm going to say that again. Bent Flyberg from Oxford and Giuliano De Nicole from University College London have both done, large-scale meta-analysis of projects. And they've looked at it from slightly different lenses, but there's some commonalities in what they're saying. And I'll sketch it out for you.
Yeah, sure.
If you're here. Yeah. I'm going to draw the leader in the middle.
Okay.
Yep. And
that looks like a good leader to my view.
And I'm going to talk about these three kind of directions of leadership. So leading up, leading out, and leading down. And so what I mean by this is that if you're a project leader, we don't just need to lead the organization that, we have. It's not just about leading the project plans. It's not just about doing the risk assessments. It's not just about garnering our people and getting them organized.
Yep.
There are other factors here. So leading up is the kind of political and commercial dimension of projects. So the politicians who might be tinkering with the plans or changing the landscape a little bit or not coming to decisions quickly enough.
Yeah.
It doesn't just necessarily need to be politicians. It can be the commercial decision making in an organization. That is quite a lot of work. And chaperoning decision making at those levels is actually something that we know is a reason, or the lack of chaperoning is a reason why projects fail. It's one of the biggest reasons, because we cannot get people to come together and make sensible decisions about moving forwards. And then the other aspect leading out is about leading in communities, project ecosystems. So we've got communities, we've got public stakeholders. We've also got supply chain stakeholders. We've got to work with other organizations in order to get things done. That's leading out. So creating alignment between those various disparate groups is actually very important. So if we think about leading up, leading out, and leading down, we know from that research that the reasons why projects fail is in the leading up and leading out space, and less so in the leading down space. And what's really interesting here is that if we think about how we develop leaders, if we think about how we develop project leaders, we spend a lot of time teaching them how to do project plans. We spend a lot of time teaching them how to do risk assessments. We spend a lot of time teaching them how to manage their organizations.
Costing, all that sort of stuff.
So we give them a tick, maybe the leading down, right? But we don't spend much time teaching them how to deal with complex community stakeholders. And we don't spend much time teaching them how to navigate power and politics. And so this is kind of the central tension of, we know why projects fail in that leading up and leading out space, but we're not necessarily preparing the leaders of tomorrow's major projects to navigate in those two dimensions. And I think that's the central challenge that we have as a field, is how do we equip our leaders to be able to lead up, which means navigating power, politics, aligning decision-making between powerful and often disparate interests, leading out, aligning common interests between various different stakeholders, including community groups.
Excellent. Thinking about leading up and also out, for example, when we're talking about the public projects, then it's a matter of dealing with politicians. They go out there and make a lot of promises, and then it's the project leader who is left with delivering based on those promises. And normally the project leader, I wanted to say the guy, but I have to keep it neutral basically. So the guy or gal in there as a project leader, they know what managing or leading up looks like, but do they have enough influence on the people sitting in that circle? You know what I mean? Or how they could influence, or how they could convey the right message to them to basically protect their projects and also enable them to lead better down this track. What do you think about that?
I love that word influence, because I think you've hit on what leadership is. It's a process of influence. And the challenge that we have here with this leading up is influencing without authority.
That's exactly right. Because they may have authority in this space down.
That's right.
But they don't have authority up. They just maybe have influence if they have it.
That's right. So you can't sack a politician for not adhering to my project plan, right? Whereas I can sack someone who works for me. So this is the challenge, right? It's how do I influence in a place where I don't have authority? And that's a fascinating topic, because this is really where we need quite evolved thinking in our project leaders. We need quite mature thinking, and we need leaders who can get below the surface of things. So while a politician, and just using that as an example, and politicians might say, look, we want to do all of this stuff, and we can just react to that. A reactionary leader type would just say, okay, you want to do all that, I'll try my best to get it done. Or we could tell them that it's complete baloney and we can't get it done. But a more mature leader would go into that and treat that more as a negotiation and start to get under the surface of what really matters to the politicians. Now, politicians all have usually a desire to be re-elected, and sometimes the conversation around being able to shift that from, well, we need to get all this done, to actually we need to do something which is sustainable, and appeal to that interest of being re-elected is maybe a way of shifting that conversation. And that's that. I'm not saying that's the solution everywhere, but it's that type of shifting the conversation, which is leadership. That's where the influence comes from. It comes from getting behind what's said and tapping into the underlying motivations of people and being able to use and work with those motivations in order to shape a better direction. We have loads of examples of this where it happens. There are examples in the UK where they've really shifted political thinking on how to commission and engage major projects, which has all come from the field, where they said, actually, we need to educate politicians on how to do this better. So we can do it. We need to think about doing it.
Absolutely. That's good news. Do we have anything else left on the why projects fail, or we already know? Of course, having said that, I know that if we wanted to talk only today about why projects fail, we have the whole day. That wouldn't really do the justice to the subject. But in a limited amount of time that we have got available, I think we have really covered a lot of good ground here. What else do you like to add there?
I think I'd add a little bit on the leading out bit, because I was talking a little while back to someone who built the first motorway in Sydney, and this is back in the, I think, 70s or 80s.
Right.
And is a funny guy to listen to, because he says, Brad, we just started at one end and we went to the other end and we built it. And like I was like, yeah, just like that. And I went, oh, okay, that's interesting, because I'm pretty sure that if you did that today, it would not work. And
that's what I was thinking.
He acknowledged that. And so, we have, we have community groups, we have interest groups, and that's part of our society. It's part of the fabric of our democracy that we live in. So this leading out is also important. And there's a study recently published, actually, from two of my colleagues, Jennifer White and Laura Motti, who talked about the community engagement in the Rozelle interchange.
Oh, okay.
And what's really fascinating there is the difference in perceptions of success between different groups. You've got the project team who think it was success largely because they were on time and on budget, and you've got the community who think it was a raging failure because the traffic that sort of evolved from it wasn't really what they were expecting. But also there were some other things that were under the hood of that, like, cycle access and cycleway disruption and things like that. And what was interesting was that different community groups also had different reasons of why they thought that was a failed project. And so this is kind of that's an example of actually where it didn't go well, but there's some great insights there in terms of how we need to think about these groups, and how what's conceived as success from some of those groups can change with time.
Yeah.
And this is another example of where leaders need that maturity to be able to stay connected with those disparate groups, understand what's really going on under the hood in their conversations, understand those underlying interests and motivations, but also understand that they can change with time, and we need to keep on top of them.
Absolutely. So if you want to really to sum it up, it's stakeholder management and communication. And also having on top of our mind that not everybody measures success with the same scale.
Absolutely.
If we're talking with the internal team of a project, if they have done on time, within a budget, within a scope, and the quality that's expected, they give themselves the tick of approval.
That's right.
However, if you talk with the business owner down the track that his business has been disrupted for like 2 years, 3 years, which, by the way, happens in all major projects. Look at the City Light trade.
Yes.
That even there is something in the court, I guess, about that like compensation about loss of revenue. So if you talk to that guy, say, look, guess what? This is a fantastic project. It has been delivered within a time, within a budget. They can't care less about it. But what they care is about the loss of a business in past 2 years. Or if you talk to the neighbors, next to the project, the dust and all the like uncomfortable condition that they had, the extra traffic, So all of these are definitely part of the stakeholder group or interest groups that we talked about, and not all of them are measuring the success by the same scale.
That's right.
That's really important.
Yeah, and we've got different groups in terms of different measures of success, but you also hit on something which is the difference between outputs and outcomes. And that's another debate. We could do another podcast on that.
I believe so.
Outputs being, was it on time and on budget, but outcomes being, what has this really done for our community? How is it improving our lives?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Already jumping to the second one that we have got here, the unique challenge of a modern day projects. Do we have any challenge in modern projects? AI has solved all the problem, hasn't it? So let's dive into that.
Oh, I wish AI was the answer here. Then we could just go and sit on the beach and
get the universal income, don't we?
That's right. That's
going to happen.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm not holding my breath.
I'm on the same line. No. So let's see what's happening here.
There's a few things to point out here, and. Look, I talked about leading up and leading out, but I think there's also some stuff around the backdrop of what's going on. And what we're seeing in modern projects is complexity, pace, and uncertainty.
Oh, yeah.
They're probably the three. I think I'd probably add another one there, which is what you mentioned, which is resource.
Yeah.
And so if we look at this, we know that complexity is on the increase. The example I use is the Model T Ford. It has something like 1,000 parts. A modern Toyota Corolla has like 12,000 parts. The Model T Ford was built by one person, or designed by one person, built in one factory. The modern Toyota Corolla is built in multiple factories around the world by thousands of people. It's designed by teams that live in different continents. It's much more complex. And we know that, in our major projects as well, that they are getting incredibly more complex, and that's an ever-increasing path. I think the other aspect here is pace, so pace of change. Justin Trudeau got up in Davos in 2018, and he said the pace of change in the world is the fastest it ever has been, yet the slowest it ever will be in the future. And I think he's got an interesting point there, because we are seeing the pace of change increase. Since 2018, we've had a pandemic, we've got global political upheaval, we've had the rise of AI. So pace of change is a really important factor in the backdrop here. The other thing is uncertainty. What this brings, what the modern context brings is new things which we haven't dealt with before. We don't know how to use AI yet. So how do we lean into that uncertainty and start to make sense of it? And that probably brings me to AI as a resource. I think it would be, some people might think it would be enough to say that the world out there is changing, but actually what AI is doing is changing the world in here. It's changing how we interact with information. It's no longer the case where we have a book behind us that we refer to, but it's also changing the way that we interact with our resource. So rather than asking people to do complex problems, to write reports, we can ask AI to write reports. And so that foundational interaction that we have, the human-to-human interaction that we have to design projects, is being disrupted.
Absolutely.
And AI is becoming a team member. And it's much more than that as well. I do some coaching, and in the coaching space, it's possible to actually train AI to be your coach. And so the coaching world is going to be decimated because people will just have a personal AI bot that we say, look, what do you think about this? And they go, maybe you should try that. This is what's coming.
100%. Yeah, definitely. Using AI a lot, generating the reports, but obviously we don't want to find ourselves generating reports, sending it to a government agency, but one of the big fours gets smacked. Hey, wait a minute. $440,000 for just an AI report generated, because it's in the news. I'm mentioning that it's not confidential info. But look, this is one of the things that will come to the surface very quickly. Okay, so in particular in a consulting space, and the sort of IP that the big consultancy firm had, and with that they were able to charge clients arms and legs, of course, for a good reason. That sort of doesn't exist anymore. You just put your problem or the issue in the AI, in different tools that we have got available. Even you can put it in different systems and then compare the outputs of those, okay? And you get and in a very short span of time, not months, okay, you get a very good report that you could polish and send to your client or use it for your own. But of course, please do not charge $440,000 for an AI-generated report, okay? We leave it there. But yeah, that's right. I mean, the amount of complexity or uncertainty that is impacting our project and project domains, and also the leadership and how the leaders are managing those projects have skyrocketed. And even we don't know. I mean, imagine you go to the bed and you wake up the next day. In the news, they tell, okay, a free democracy have gone to another country, captured their leader. I'm not saying it's right, it's wrong, or whatever. It's not our place to say. But what I'm trying to say is that it adds uncertainty. It adds complexity for the projects, for people, for organizations that are doing all this stuff. It's going to interrupt them. It's going to impact them in a good way or in a bad way. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's going to impact them. It's going to add another level of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because if I'm the leader and I'm delivering one of those big projects, I would say, oh, wait a minute, what could happen tomorrow? It simply increases the risk profile of my project and my commitment to the next organization and to the next. Yeah. And it impacts everything, doesn't it? Because it's not that typical day in, day out anymore, is it? You have got AI, you have got that powerful president or presidents or leader or leaders that they're not even that much predictable. And all of this will add to this level of uncertainty and the environment that we're operating in, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not just the political landscape, it's the technology landscape. It's this idea about how do we think about the future, when we're struggling to deal with the present. And one of the examples I have is, I used to work in government in the UK, as I mentioned, and a lot of those governments tried to get private sector to do their work, and they signed up for 10-year contracts. And what I observed was that about halfway through those contracts, a lot of them regretted doing that because simply just the world had changed so much. Technology had changed so much.
The government regretted or the private sector?
The government regretted. And the private sector was, a lot of those things actually that the private sector wanted to help, but the government was too rigid to be able to be flexible. But being able to be flexible and dynamic moving forwards. And I think this comes to a central challenge of leadership, because for some reason, which I don't yet understand, we tend to seek certainty. We tend to seek certainty about what's next, certainty about what's going to happen in the future. And it permeates in projects by way of a project plan. So things go wrong in a project, and what's the first thing that leaders says? They say, what's the plan? What's our plan in terms of converting this uncertainty into certainty? And that's what people go and do. They try and nut out a plan. They try and work out a way through it. We know that that's the worst way to deal with uncertainty because a planning mindset implies the central premise of planning is that we have knowledge, predisposed knowledge of what we can do in this situation. But in uncertainty, the very definition of uncertainty is that we don't know. So what we're trying to do actually in that context, when we're asking people to put a plan together, is we're saying, bring your old knowledge to this new and unknown situation. And it doesn't always work.
Yeah. That's why the project leaders are not going to stop with plan, and there is always plan B and plan C, meaning that if the first plan didn't work, then what would be the next course of action if the first plan and the first design plan failed to deliver what's
we know
expected,
that most plans don't survive first contact with the enemy. I guess that's the army and the armed forces version of
analogy.
this.
Yeah.
Another way of saying that, and I was speaking to someone, a general in the armed forces the other day, and he said, the enemy has a say here. Yeah. And I think that's a great way of thinking about it. We can do our bit, but there's going to be some other interaction here that will be unpredictable, and we need to prepare for that unpredictability. And so what this means for project leaders is that how we train their thinking is much more about, well, what do we do when we don't know? What do we do when we get new problems that we haven't seen before? And how do we approach those? Do we say, oh, what's the plan? Which we know doesn't work. Or do we say, okay, what are the skills and the mindsets and the ways of being that can help decode that uncertainty, help observe what's going on, discover patterns, put those patterns together, shape meaning from that situation, and then give that meaning to others in terms of a way forward or an action plan.
Absolutely. So in fact, learning the skill of how to deal with the situation in all this uncertain environment that we have got, and still we're trying to deliver our projects or reach the goals and get the things over the line, isn't it?
That's right.
Excellent. Alrighty, next one, zombie leadership.
Yeah. So this is not my phrase. This is a phrase from Alex Haslam and colleagues from the University of Queensland. They did a wonderful conceptualization of leadership. They call it zombie leaders. And zombie means dead ideas about leadership that still walk amongst us. And so dead ideas being, we know they don't work, yet they're still alive and well in our society. And there are many. There are two that I want to highlight here because I think they're important to project leadership. And the first one is competencies. And I guess the other one is that leaders are responsible. Leaders are the prime determinant on success. Cool. So these two things. For 40, 60 years, leadership science has worked in this way. It's looked at successful leaders and it's tried to decode what they do.
Yeah.
And the idea is if we decode what they do, then we'll be able to codify it and we'll be able to teach it to new leaders, and then they can replicate. Replicate, exactly. Research and development, replicate and duplicate. That's essentially what it is. And the problem with that is that we've been doing that for 60 years. We have no idea what those competencies are. We have no idea. We've looked at it from a psychological perspective. So we looked at all the personality types, the 5 main personality types. We've looked at from intelligence. We've looked at from behaviors of leaders. And we're none the wiser. The only factor through that work that has some correlation with leadership effectiveness is intelligence, and it at best sort of accounts for about 3% of the variation between a good leader and a bad leader. So it is helpful to be intelligent, but it's that much helpful.
Is it IQ or EQ we talk about?
IQ. Even EQ, we can't find a correlation. In that sense. And so what this means is that there's something else going on. There's something else going on here. And I'll explain it to you like this. So, We talk a lot about people say they use the terms extrovert and introvert to describe different people. Yeah, and some people say extroverts are better leaders. Some people say introverts are better leaders. But let me give you a little example. So if you take an extrovert and you put them in a networking event, you're going to expect that they're going to behave gregariously, they're going to interact, they're going to talk with lots of people, they're going to, sell themselves a little bit, make lots of connections, etc. You put that same extrovert at a funeral, do you expect them to do the same thing? No, absolutely not. In fact, it would be odd, wouldn't it? It would be completely odd if they did that. And so what that means is that there might be something else going on here a little bit deeper than whether we're an extrovert or an introvert. There's something here about leaders who can be aware of their surroundings, being aware of the context, and being able to adjust their behavior and their style to match. And that's deeper than extroversion and introversion.
Indeed.
That's a deeper awareness. And this is where we start to touch on the concept of a mindset. What are these deeper ways of thinking and being which guide our behavior? That's what a mindset is.
Amazing. So on the competencies, if I'm an MBA graduate from Harvard, it doesn't guarantee the success for my organization, or does it?
Look,
because let me make it clear. I want a 6-figure salary as well with a lot of perks.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
But does it make it?
Look, it's a great question because MBAs are very competency focused. And I'm not going to say, that they are bad for doing that. I think there is some helpful stuff that they do. What we are seeing, though, is a real decline in MBAs around the world. Virtually every business school that you speak to will say that they've got declining enrollments in MBAs. Now, I am just putting my own version of events on here. I think that that's because people are starting to wise up that I can spend, 80, 100,000, even more in some of the US universities, take a chunk out of my life at the same time that I want to buy a house and, get married and do all that life stuff to get a set of competencies which may or may not be valid in 5 or 10 years' time. So I think there's this conversation that we're starting to have around, what is it that we need? And I think AI really precipitates this as well, because if you take that competency thing and you say, okay, well, AI could do that for us. AI could tell me how I need to show up for this meeting. AI could tell me whether I need to be more extroverted or introverted. Yeah. AI can tell me, how to analyze this bit of information, right? Or how to do some strategy. So, well, where's the role for the leader there? Well, the role for the leader there is in that deeper thinking, like how do I show up at a funeral or a networking event, and that's the deeper meaning that we need to make from these situations, and that's where leadership is heading into that deeper mindset, meaning-making perspective.
Not necessarily having loads of certifications from here and there.
That's right.
No worries at all. Yeah, and the next one.
Yeah. So the other zombie leadership ideal is that leaders are the prime determinant on success. This is really interesting because, we pay leaders the big bucks, right? And when things don't go well, we fire them, and things go really well, we promote them.
Just enormous.
Simple. Yeah, simple equation. Absolutely.
Another leader.
And then, actually there's a really great study by Boris Kreuzberg who took successful leaders from one organization, moved them to the other organization. And what we found actually is that they didn't perform as well in the new organization, which is a clue. It's a clue that success is a little bit more than the leader. Success is about the team, the group of people that come together. And this is quite profound because when we look at success and failure, and when researchers look at success and failure and they dive into the people that contributed to success or failure, people rarely call out the leader. They call out, the colleague, the frontline worker who noticed something, the colleague who helped them reframe thinking and that advanced the organization. These little things that happen at a micro level which advance the organization. And so that really changes leadership as well. It really changes how we conceptualize leadership from a leader kind of being in charge and calling all the shots to a leader that creates an environment where people can interact positively in a healthy way with each other. And so that's a really important bit of insight that unfortunately, we still hang on to this idea that it's the leaders that are the prime determinant. And actually, it's the communities and the environments that leaders create, which is the prime determinant of success or failure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So very similar to the financial sector, that they have got to discriminate and say, hey, past performance is not the guarantee of the future. I think it really applies to the leaders as well. So if they have done one or two previous successful projects, or if they have done great in a certain environment with a certain a company, it doesn't mean that in the next job and in the next environment also they'll do the same. Yeah. And I found it a lot when, for example, we have got a project that's halfway in the flight and there has been some challenges. So typically, as you said, they get rid of the leader and they bring another person in when sort of it's half cooked already, and then the poor person the next leader wanted to basically come and pick up the pieces.
Yep.
Things are half baked, and then from there, he or she wants basically to get the things up and running and do a lot of things and make the things happen, which is really the most difficult situation. However, if they're allocated from the beginning of the project, where the things are not still settled, nothing is cooked, nothing is planned, nothing has happened, then probably that's where they could have the biggest impact, rather than when they come halfway, well, for whatever reason, and they say, look, I have got, a lot of past experience that, have delivered a great project with great outcome, and I'm going to do the same thing again here. That's not that much replicable. People are different, environment is different, the stakeholders are different. So
there's a lot in that, and I think one of the key premises here is the idea of the power within, and the outsized effect on outcomes being how people come together versus who the leader is, and I think that's quite a profound shift for us as a community, as a profession to wrap our heads around, because it has profound impacts on how we train leaders and how we can see leadership.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps we don't need the gung-ho kind of bravado leader. Perhaps we need the quiet person who's good at actually building relationships. Maybe.
Food for thought.
Yes.
Great. So next one we have got new framing of leadership. What comes under that?
Well, so if we take the idea that competencies are out and that we don't need to list a set of competencies and say to be a good leader you need to check all these boxes. So we're going to abandon that and say actually there's no evidence to say that works, so let's just stop trying to do that. Then the question is what's next? And the clues are in what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So the clues are in the challenges, in the complexity and uncertainty. And what we're talking about there is really how leaders make meaning from situations, how they make meaning from complexity and uncertainty and give meaning to others in a way that motivates and inspires. And so that we just call essentially mindset. And I'm going to draw this on a scale and I'll come back to why. But this is really how leaders think. And this axis here is how leaders relate and how they create collaboration. So if we think about it, we decode what we've been talking about, we've got this complexity and uncertainty, which means it puts emphasis on how leaders can convert complexity and uncertainty into clarity, how they can make meaning from it. That is really the thinking part. That's the thinking part of leadership. The next bit, which we've been talking about here, and particularly about the leaders are the prime determinant on success. Well, actually, that's not true. It's actually about how the teams come together and how they share knowledge and insights and how they build on those insights. That puts an emphasis on relational skills, the relational skills of leaders to be able to create environments of collaboration in that sense. We call this in the field, we call it, vertical and horizontal development. The vertical development is evolving how leaders think, and the horizontal development is creating the relational skill sets and abilities to build those productive relationships within and across systems.
So we have got the mindset on one axe, and we have got how leaders relate and collaborate. Is it a collaboration like like down or up or like in all
doesn't
segments?
matter.
It doesn't matter.
All directions.
Yeah.
So these two directions relate to both leading up, leading out, and leading down. So in terms of let's just give an example for leading up. Mindset is really about the ability to decode and understand what say political or commercial figures are thinking, and being able to make meaning out of that, and being able to then plot or chart a new way forwards, or create a sense of inquiry where we're trying to shift that thinking. And then the relational skills is how to host those containers of conversations, how to bring those people together. There's a lot underneath this, to be able to operate in these dimensions. We need things like trust. We need things like psychological safety.
Of course.
We need things like character. Character is important for leaders. So there's a lot under the hood here, but really in terms of the framing, what leadership is moving from is we're moving out of competencies into thinking and relational skill sets.
Exactly. Just to coming back on the number 3, we're not saying that having qualifications like MBA, PMP, or all the rest of qualification is not needed. But what we say, that's nice to have, but it doesn't. Once upon a time, when people had those qualifications, they were guaranteed to get those like managerial or leadership roles, and because they were taught or they were educated a certain way, it was expected that they will bring the same attitude and the same way of thinking or a skill set to the table for the organization and for the project, and necessarily get the expected outcome out. However, in the new environment, in the new uncertain and challenging environment with the AI and lots of moving parts, we find ourselves that necessarily just having a piece of paper is not going to cut it. That's going to be good, but it's not good enough.
That's right.
That's going to be one element, but that's not the whole element. That's just going to be a piece of pie that's going to help and bring the things together, isn't it?
Especially when I talk to potential participants in the ELMP, some of them have MBAs.
Okay.
And
still they sign up for it.
And they're still signing up for this,
right?
Because they're saying, it's not enough. It's not enough. The competency-based learning, the case studies that we did are not enough to equip me with the abilities to make sense of a future world.
Absolutely. Do we want to have some examples on number 4, new framing of a leadership, or moving to number 5?
I can do an example.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I think, sometimes people say to me, well, what's a mindset, Brad?
Yeah.
And adult development psychology has actually mapped all this out for us. There are 8 stages of mindset that people go through as they develop. So there's one at the bottom end of the schedule. At the bottom end of the spectrum, we've got a very impulsive person, essentially a child, who can't control. They get hungry, they cry, or they get hungry, they're angry.
Does it apply to the leaders as well?
Yeah. Well,
when they're early leaders,
we have shadows. So as we progress through this scale, we still have certain shadows which take us back, and we can be quite impulsive or opportunist. I mean, for example, when I go to an airport, my opportunist comes out. I just want to get through that queue as quickly as I can. You know, so if that means there's a gap, I'm going for it, right? That's there. That's part of me. That's part of my meaning making that surfaces at that time. So the other end of the spectrum is the philosopher. You know, the person who's really sitting back and looking at the world's problems and actually looking at a system level and saying, what are some of the beliefs and the values that we have, and how do I challenge those? How do I frame new ways of thinking? And there's a bunch of stages in between. The two stages in between, which I think are most important to talk about here, are the difference between an expert and a transforming mindset.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So if we think of an expert, we have experts everywhere in society, right? Doctors are experts, engineers are experts, academics are experts. These are people who frame their ways of interacting with their workplace based on their knowledge and expertise. And in that mindset, in that thinking, one of the primary sort of things that is going on under the hood is the quality of one's contribution. So when there's a problem, if I'm an expert, I'm thinking, how can I contribute in a quality way? Something in my knowledge, something in my insight, something that I've seen. I want to make a quality contribution to that conversation. That's great. You know, when I'm having a heart attack, you know, I want someone who's going to give a quality contribution to that problem at that particular point in time. Fantastic. We need experts in society.
No doubt.
Experts make terrible leaders. Because of complexity and uncertainty. And so once we get into complex environments, the probability that knowledge set that leader has is going to be the thing which paves our way forwards is actually incredibly low, because that would imply that they've studied that, they understand that situation. And so this is the transforming mindset. These are some of the things I've been talking about being able to make sense of complexity. So the transforming mindset doesn't jump in and say, this is my contribution to this problem. The transforming mindset looks around, starts to make observations of what's happening in this new and uncertain place that we're in, starts to identify the patterns that are running under the hood, and then starts to make meaning of those patterns. And so that is a different way of being. Those transforming people are not driven by the idea that they need to contribute something. They're driven by the idea that they need to help other people make sense of things, and they need to make sense of it themselves. And by making sense of things in new ways, we can change how we work. And that's a different mindset. Now, what adult development psychology does is it unpacks these mindsets, and it unpacks the journey in between. The problem we have as society is most people stop developing a little bit past expert. And we know we need the transforming mindsets for leadership, for leaders. We've got studies of this. So one study in particular, 80% of transforming mindset leaders successful in their organizations. 80% of expert leaders in organizations completely fail. So it's quite clear, right? It's clear. The data's pretty clear here. Yet we have this problem that most people are not getting through to transforming in their development journey. And part of that problem is that we're not focusing on it in our leadership development. So we're putting time into competencies, for example, and we're not putting time into developing mindsets. And so this transition from expert to transforming mindset is something we focus on in the ELMP. We focus on, let's unpack that meaning making that's going on. Let's unpack what's going on inside us when we want to be an expert, and let's start to replace that with some more transforming mindset.
Absolutely. It reminds me, and my best guess is that majority of the audience that come to the John Gray Institute, they are experts already. So they're expert in their field, in the craft, in whatever they do. They are the best of engineering managers or project managers. So they know it all, okay? They are experts, all right? They're the best cost managers or the best engineering managers, but that's exactly what stops them to be a good leader, because that expertise and being SME in that subject, okay, enables them to always talk over people. And when they have a team conversation, because they are the experts, it's like that surgeon when it's in operating room, he or she is the one that giving all the directions. He or she is not going to like listen to like what others. So there is like one authority there that gives all the direction, do this, do that, pass me the knife, la 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 la. And exactly the same thing happens in the project environment. And when we have those experts coming to the table, it means everybody else just zip up and just listen and do.
Yes.
And that's not the way to really lead the communities lead the projects, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great example, because when we are faced with these difficult and complex challenges, we need more voices in the room.
Oh yeah.
We need people to speak up. We need, we know that psychological safety, for example, is so important, because people in that room will have little insights into this problem, things they've seen, things they've noticed, potential solutions. And if we have that expert coming in saying, oh, this is the way, then we're just going to silence all of those voices. So yeah, this is our challenge. It's interesting. The people that generally come on the ELMP have kind of noticed this themselves. They've noticed that their expert's not getting them where they need to be, but they're not quite sure what that next thing is. And that's the bit that we color in for them. We color in, well, what does this transforming mindset look like, and how does it help me?
Great. I'm just getting very, very interested in this. Maybe I even sign up for the course. Okay, diving into the next one. So what's needed for the leadership development to work?
Yeah, look, I think I've already answered this. My mission, if you like to say that, is to really put a dent on how we train our leaders of the future. So to me, what's needed for leadership development to work is we need an understanding in industry that what we're doing is not quite good enough. So we need we need CEOs and senior leaders to kind of understand that a desire for a better way. I'm starting to see that. When I meet chief execs, a lot of them are saying, Brad, I need my people to lead better in uncertainty. I notice that they don't cope with complexity. I need, and they don't know how. So I think there's starting to be a bit of a desire for, doing some different things. I think what's also needed is to step out of the competency-based thinking. Most organizations that I go into, I ask them, I say, well, what's your leadership identity or philosophy? And they give me a leadership framework, and it's full of competencies. It's not full of mindsets or how do our leaders think, or how do they relate to each other? It might say, oh, are they good at leading others, right? Okay, that's not really a competency. That's just a tick box exercise. So I think, what's also required is we need to step out of this competency-based thinking, and we need to embrace what the science is telling us, which is embrace developmental learning, which is developing those more mature mindsets. So I think it's embrace developmental learning.
Sure.
And also embrace the relational side of leadership. Embrace the idea that it's not just about the leader, it's about the environments and the communities and the contributions of everyone in the organization. And that really puts the emphasis on leadership, not as what leaders do, but the environments that leaders create.
Exactly.
And that's what we do. That's what we're doing at the John Grill Institute. is pulling together leadership development that focuses on this new science, that focuses on the thinking, the mindsets, the relational skills, which will help leaders thrive in the modern and complex projects. What I'll also add, just as another thing here, is that this isn't a theoretical exercise. When we do these leadership development programs, they are based on the real life examples of typical modern day projects. Because there's something I haven't mentioned here, but learning in a classroom is useless unless it's applied to a particular. We know from adult learning that it has to be. It's more effective when it's applied on a particular problem that we have at work. So when we design these things, we're designing it with projects in mind. We're designing it with the real life examples for projects, and we're also bringing industry stalwarts in to present cases, challenges, experience, stories of how they've faced challenges in major projects. And then we're using this thinking, these mindsets, these relational skills to decode or deconstruct those situations and understand what was the thinking here, what was happening at a relational level, and then rebuilding up new ways of leading based on those examples and based on this science.
Amazing. That's great. I'm sure there is a lots really still to go on and talk about all the subject that we have got here. But in a very limited amount of time that we have got here today available, I think it was really, really good conversation. I myself learned a lot of stuff. Thank you very much for that. Do you have good book recommendation for our audience to have a look at?
I have a couple.
Oh, please.
My first one's not a book recommendation. It's actually a HBR, Harvard Business Review article.
Right.
And it's called The 7 Transformations of Leadership. And it talks about this vertical development, the mindset development piece, and it really articulates it quite succinctly. So I would recommend, if you're interested, starting with that.
Sure.
If you're even more interested and you want a lighthearted read, then I'd recommend reading Leadership Jazz by Frank Barrett. He talks about the metaphor of playing jazz, which is improvisation, and actually how that applies to leadership. And it really does dig into the complexity and uncertainty kind of aspects that we've been talking about. So I'd highly recommend that. If you want a more gritty, how do I develop myself as a leader book, then I would recommend Clear Leadership by Jervis Bush. That really gets under the hood of what we need to do in this developmental learning piece. I'd recommend that one. Three recommendations.
Fantastic. Look, it was really great conversation today, and leadership is really the topic that we could talk about it hours and hours and days and months, up to 12 months, probably 11 months or 12 months. And even doesn't stop there really, because it's evolving environment, and with all the new public changes and things that we're seeing around ourselves, and the environment that's really changing constantly. Obviously, having the latest science-backed research and learning is really a crucial component that help all of us really to be a better leader, a better version of ourselves in managing and leading the projects and organizations that we are busy with. So thank you very much for your time today. It was really great, and I believe we have to do another session on this one later on as well. But thank you very much for your time today. It was great. Thank you.
Pleasure, Ali. It was really a great experience talking to you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks.